Picture a riverbank in East Africa, more than a million years ago. A small band of hominids has spent the entire morning doing one thing: chewing. Their jaws ache from grinding through fibrous roots and cold, stringy raw meat. Downwind, a patch of grass struck by lightning is still smoldering in the dawn. One of them steps toward the heat, reaches into the warm ash, and lifts something out. What changed? That single moment, whenever it truly happened, may be the most important thing our ancestors ever did. Because cooking is the one behavior that every human culture on Earth shares. Not language, not religion, not music. Those all vary enormously from place to place. But every society ever found, from remote foragers to modern cities, cooks its food. It's the closest thing we have to a truly universal human act. And we don't just do it because food tastes better cooked, though it very clearly does. We do it because our bodies can no longer survive properly without it. That's a strange thing to be true of a species, and almost nobody notices it. Every other animal alive eats its food exactly as it finds it, while we alone insist on changing ours with fire before we'll touch it. A lion never sears its kill, and no gorilla has ever roasted its fruit. Look at yourself next to a chimpanzee for a moment. Your jaw is weaker, your teeth are smaller, your gut is dramatically shorter. Your whole digestive system looks built for food that has already been processed somehow, and it was, by fire, long before you were ever born. Those aren't flaws in your design. They're the fingerprints of a decision an ancestor made a million years ago, pressed permanently into your body. A chimpanzee can thrive on raw food because its body is built for it from the ground up. Huge gut, powerful jaw, teeth made for endless grinding. You have none of that. You traded it all away for something else entirely. To see why this matters, you have to go back to the raw world. Our early ancestors ran roughly the same dietary playbook that chimpanzees still run today: raw fruit, tough roots, bark, leaves, insects, and the occasional lucky scrap of meat. This kind of food is stubborn. It resists your teeth, and then it resists your gut. Modern chimps spend around half of their waking hours simply chewing, not hunting, not socializing, not building anything at all, just chewing. Raw food surrenders its calories painfully slowly, and there is no shortcut around the work. Your whole day bends around the basic task of staying fed. Harvard anthropologist Richard Wrangham tested this himself by eating wild chimpanzee foods in Uganda. He found them almost unbearable: hard, bitter, fibrous, and exhausting to chew for the time it took to swallow. He could spend 10 minutes on a single piece of wild fruit and enjoy almost none of it. He came away convinced that no human, with our small jaws and short guts, could survive on that diet long term. We simply can't pull enough energy out of it to stay alive. So something must have changed in our past. Something let our ancestors extract far more fuel from exactly the same food. Something freed them from spending half their lives grinding it down. And the wildest part is that we don't really know how it first started. We don't know if the first cooking was deliberate or a pure accident. We don't know whether someone watched food fall into a wildfire and tasted the result. We don't know if the first cooked meal was meat or plants. What we do know is that once it happened, there was no going back. Something clicked and the species was never the same again. Wrangham's answer, which he laid out in 1999 and expanded in his book Catching Fire, was cooking. And this is where his claim turns radical. We tend to assume evolution went one obvious way. First, we grew big, clever brains, and then those brains eventually figured out how to cook. Wrangham argues the arrow points the other way entirely. Our ancestors started cooking first, and cooking is what grew the brain. The habit came before the intelligence, not after it. That single reversal changes the whole story of how we got here. To understand how, you have to understand what heat actually does to food. Take a raw potato. Its starch is locked inside tight crystalline granules your enzymes can barely touch. Apply heat and those granules absorb water, swell, and burst open in a process called gelatinization. Suddenly your gut can reach the calories inside. The same potato, cooked, hands over far more energy than it ever would raw. You eat the identical object and get more out of it, purely because it met fire. Heat does something just as useful to meat. Raw meat is packed with tough connective tissue that's genuinely hard to break down. Cooking unravels those proteins into looser forms your enzymes can attack with ease. It ruptures the cell walls of plants and frees nutrients that were trapped inside them. It even destroys many of the natural toxins and pathogens that raw food quietly carries. In one stroke, heat makes food safer, softer, and richer, all at the same time. It's also why cooked food simply tastes better to us. That craving isn't random or trivial. It's an old instinct pulling us toward the calories our bodies came to depend on. We are, in a real sense, wired to prefer the very food that made us. In other words, cooking is a kind of pre-digestion. You're doing part of the chemical work outside the body, using fire as an external stomach. So your own gut gets a far easier job and burns less energy finishing it. Studies comparing cooked and raw versions of the same meal consistently find you absorb more from the cooked one. This isn't a minor nutritional bonus. In a world where food is scarce and competition is fierce, that gap is the difference between thriving and slowly starving. Then there's the matter of time. Cooked food is soft, so it barely needs chewing at all. Wrangham estimates that as cooking spread, chewing time may have collapsed from roughly half the day toward the single hour modern humans spend. That figure is an estimate, not a hard measurement, but even loosely, it means several hours freed every single day. Now think about what a creature can do with hours it never had before. Hunt with more strategy, make better tools, teach children skills that take patience, build alliances across a group, explore new land, plan for a future instead of grinding through the present. A few free hours a day sounds small. Stretched across a whole species, over 100,000 generations, it's enough to rewrite what that species becomes. The campfire, then, was never just a stove. It was a shield that kept predators at a distance through the night. It was warmth that opened up colder land to live in. It was a fixed point where a scattered group could gather and stay together. And all of these effects compounded quietly across thousands upon thousands of generations, each small advantage stacked on the last. And this ran not for years or centuries, but for hundreds of thousands of years without a break. Slow pressure applied that long doesn't just change a habit, it reshapes an entire animal from the inside out. Now, here's the part that should genuinely stop you. Look at what happens to the human body in the fossil record right around when cooking is thought to begin. Roughly 1.8 million years ago, Homo erectus appears, and it looks strikingly different from anything before it. A bigger brain, a taller, longer legged body built for real distance, and crucially, smaller jaws, smaller teeth, and a much shorter gut than its ancestors had. That gut shrinkage is a genuinely big deal, and it's easy to underrate. Other primates carry an enormous digestive system to ferment mountains of raw plant matter. That gut is expensive to run. It demands constant blood flow, it generates heat, and it devours energy just to keep itself going. In Homo erectus, it had shrunk substantially, and the energy saved by carrying less gut didn't simply vanish into nothing. It was redirected to the single hungriest organ we own, the brain, which in modern humans burns around a fifth of all the energy we use in a day. But here's the claim that really matters. A smaller gut only works if the food entering it is far richer and easier to digest than raw food could ever be, which means the shrinking gut, the growing brain, and the arrival of cooking all line up at the very same moment in our deep history. And cooking is the only thing that makes the entire trade physically possible. Brazilian neuroscientist Susana Herculana Rosell ran the raw numbers and found the raw food path essentially blocked. For a gorilla to fuel a human-sized brain on its ordinary diet, it would need to eat for something like an hour and a half extra a day, on top of the 8 or 9 it already spends. There simply aren't enough daylight hours in which to do it. Raw food cannot power a brain like ours. Cooking can, and apparently did. The brain is a greedy organ, and something had to pay for it. Cooked food picked up the bill. So where is the hard evidence? Here, honesty matters far more than a clean, tidy story. The oldest widely accepted sign of controlled fire comes from Wonderwer Cave in South Africa, where burned bone and ashed plant remains, found deep inside the cave, point to fire use around 1 million years ago. That location, far from the mouth of the cave, argues against a stray natural wildfire drifting in. In northern Israel, at a site called Gesher Benat Yaakov, researchers reported carefully heated fish remains dating back roughly 780,000 years, some of the earliest direct traces of cooking specifically, and not just fire in general. But there is a real tension buried in these dates. If cooking truly began with Homo erectus nearly 2 million years ago, then we are missing hundreds of thousands of years of evidence. Wrangham's reply is simple. Small open air campfires barely leave a trace over such enormous spans of time. The fires of modern foragers, like the Hadza in Tanzania, are modest, brief, everyday affairs. They would fade from the geological record within a few thousand years, let alone a million. Fire preserves best in sheltered caves, so we should honestly expect the earliest record to be mostly gone. When exactly cooking began remains an open question. That it began at all and reshaped us is not seriously in doubt, and we can watch the consequences of that history playing out in the present. There are people today who choose to eat entirely raw, uncooked food as a lifestyle. Studies of them find they struggle to hold their body weight over time without modern tools like blenders and supplements. They burn more energy processing raw food than that food gives back to them. In a striking share of women on strict raw diets, menstruation stops altogether, the body's emergency signal that it cannot spare enough energy for reproduction. It's an accidental modern experiment, and it fits Wrangham's story disturbingly well. Our bodies have quietly lost the equipment needed to live on raw food at all. The large fermenting gut is gone. The heavy jaw and grinding molars are gone. What replaced them only works if the food arriving has already been softened by heat. No fire, no real food, no survival. It's worth resisting the urge to romanticize any of this, though. That ancient world was still brutal in ways we easily forget. High child mortality, real and frequent violence. No medicine to speak of, and lives that were often short and painful. Cooking didn't make early human life gentle or safe. What it did was make a particular kind of human body and a particular kind of human brain possible in the first place. And think about what that really makes us. Every other animal on Earth can feed itself with the body it was born with. We can't. We are the one species that genuinely depends on a tool to eat. Take fire away, and no wild food is worth the calories it costs us to process. The cooking ape is the only animal in the history of life that cannot truly feed itself alone. We built a body that assumes the fire will always be there. Because the fire changed far more than digestion alone. Once food had to be cooked, people had to gather in one place to cook it. Someone tended the flame. Someone guarded the food from thieves. Someone divided it up and shared it out fairly. Wrangham argues the hearth slowly became the seed of the household itself, of pair bonds, of a division of labor, of sharing anchored to a single warm place in the dark. And around that fire, with full stomachs and safer nights, people finally had reason and time to talk. Language, stories, plans, and laughter all found room to grow once we were no longer chewing through every waking hour of the day. And once people could talk, they could pass knowledge down. They could finally tell each other where the water was, which plants would poison you, and how to nap a sharper blade. Skills that took years to master could now cross from one generation to the next and accumulate. That, more than anything, is what let culture start to build on itself. So picture that riverbank one last time. The band gathers close as the fire catches and steadies. Someone lays raw meat against the heat and simply waits. The smell shifts, the toughness softens, and the first easy meal of their lives quietly begins. That single habit shrank their jaws, freed their days, and fed a swelling brain. Everything you are traces straight back to that ember in the ash. They learned to cook.